Hi, this is Matt Wetter with the Department of Toxic Substances Control. The following webcast presents an overview of the draft Exide Closure Implementation Plan to keep the community in and around Vernon, California informed of the status of closure activities at the Exide facility and to ensure the community knows what to expect in the coming weeks, months, and years as Exide is permanently closed and cleaned up. This presentation relates only to Phase 1 of the on-site closure activities to be performed at the Exide facility. Phase 1 of the closure is essentially the removal of the equipment and buildings that were formerly used to recycle lead-acid batteries. Information related to cleanup of the nearby residential areas and the soil and groundwater is presented elsewhere on DTSC's website. First, an overview of how we got to our current status. This is as of March 6, 2017. On December 8, 2016, DTSC approved the final closure plan and certified the final closure EIR. In order to finalize these documents, DTSC reached out to over 18,000 community members, government agencies, and community organizations via electronic mail, direct mass mailing, and a public hearing on the matter. In response to this extensive public outreach process, DTSC received over 900 individual comments from 70 different stakeholders in the community. The community stakeholders included government agencies, nonprofits, academia, local industry, and over 50 members of the public at large. DTSC considered all of the comments received and incorporated them when finalizing the closure plan and EIR. Next, I will go over what is currently in progress. The closure plan required Exide to prepare and submit a closure implementation plan for DTSC approval. The closure implementation plan describes the specific procedures that will be followed to comply with the closure plan. It does not present new information or decisions compared to either the closure plan or the EIR. What it is documentation to clarify the nuts and bolts of the specific procedures that are required based on the approved closure plan and EIR. The closure implementation plan also includes a health and safety plan that describes how workers will be protected during all aspects of the closure. Exide submitted a closure implementation plan as required by the closure plan on January 10, 2017. Though the actual document was dated January 9, 2017. There are several key elements that are described in the closure implementation plan, many of which came to fruition based on the community advisory group input. Exide is required to conduct all work within an enclosure unit maintained under negative pressure. Depending on the specific task at hand, this may include the current containment buildings, a portable enclosure unit for sampling activities and deconstruction of smaller structures such as wastewater treatment plant, and finally, a large, full enclosure unit that will be placed over the containment buildings while the buildings themselves are deconstructed. You may have heard the full enclosure units referred to by its trade name, hockey system, in other meetings or communications in the past several months. I will describe this aspect further in the next few slides. The next key element is travel route selection. In order to identify trucks carrying waste material from the Exide facility, all trucks will be marked with the yellow flag. Also, all trucks will be required to adhere to specific transportation routes that do not pass through residential areas. Instead, all trucks will turn left out of the facility and take Bandini Boulevard to I-710 to minimize excess traffic in the immediate community. Vehicle emission controls. 100% of the diesel-powered construction equipment greater than 50 horsepower must meet US EPA Tier 4 off-road emission standards, with some exceptions as listed in the MMRP. This is the most stringent EPA emission standard for off-road vehicles. There will also be strict idling restrictions. Drivers will be instructed to limit idling to no greater than 5 minutes or drivers will turn trucks off. This will also reduce construction noise. All vehicles will be required to use only low-sulfur diesel. While this is standard in most areas, it will ensure that proper fuel is used for all Exide closure activities. And finally, DTSC will hire a third-party contractor to observe all closure activities and act as DTSC's eyes and ears on a day-to-day basis to ensure that Exide complies with all aspects of the closure plan, EIR, as well as the health and safety plan, closure implementation plan, and Exide's Title V permit for air emissions. So what will happen next? In a nutshell, in the coming months, Exide will secure various permits for the closure. Now that the closure plan and EIR are finalized, they can begin applying for their Title V permit renewal, demolition permits, and several other permits identified in the EIR. Exide deconstruction contractors will also mobilize to the facility, set up temporary job trailers, and begin to construct the full enclosure unit over portions of the containment building. Next, Exide will gut the existing facilities. This includes removing all hazardous materials that are common to almost all buildings, such as asbestos-containing material in items such as tiling, mastic, etc. mercury switches that may be included in old thermostats, halogen bulbs, illuminated exit signs, caulk, etc. Then Exide will decontaminate and remove each of the interim status units. These are the tanks, conveyors, and furnaces that Exide used to handle and recycle lead-acid batteries. Everything except for a few of the kettles that have too much lead to move with the existing overhead crane will be removed from the containment building and sent off-site. Decontamination will be conducted by a combination of wet wipe-downs, HEPA vacuuming, and pressure washing. Once everything has been removed from the buildings, Exide will deconstruct the buildings themselves. This will be conducted inside the full enclosure units or the Hacky system and under negative pressure to ensure dust is completely contained. After the buildings have been deconstructed, Exide will remove and dismantle the last few kettles that were too heavy to move with the building's existing overhead crane, and instead a special gantry crane will be used inside the full enclosure unit to move the kettles so that they can be dismantled and ready for off-site transport. Once everything is deconstructed and removed, Exide will conduct soil sampling beneath the facility. The results of that soil sampling will be used to develop a plan for Phase 2 of the closure, which will address the building foundations and soil beneath the interim status units. Phase 2 of the closure plan will be carefully dovetailed with the ongoing corrective action process to ensure that a complete cleanup of the facility that fully protects human health in the community, as well as the environment for generations to come. Now that I've described the overall process that will be used to complete the closure, I will describe a few aspects of the closure that warranted more detail, so that members of the public can better understand the activities they might witness from nearby on a day-to-day basis. Exide will construct a full enclosure unit over portions of the containment building, one at a time. Exide will use full enclosure units provided by Hacky, an experienced subcontractor. The picture on the left shows a large full enclosure unit that was constructed using a Hacky system at a site in the United Kingdom. Exide will have a similar setup, but it will be configured as shown in the picture on the right. First, the West Segment 1 enclosure would be constructed over the RMPS, desulfurization, and reverb feed rooms, and those areas would be decontaminated and deconstructed. Then, the full enclosure unit will be moved to cover Segment 2 on the eastern side, which contains the blast feed room and smelter building, which will both be deconned and deconstructed. Finally, the full enclosure unit will be constructed over the center segment, and the baghouse and corridor will be deconned and deconstructed. The ducting will be reconfigured at each stage to maintain negative pressure and control dust in all work areas for the duration of the closure. Other areas of the site will be decontaminated under portable enclosure units, similar to those that Exide has used for past maintenance and investigation activity at the site. Once the full enclosure unit is constructed over a given segment, Exide will begin decontamination and deconstruction work. All such work will occur inside the full enclosure units. However, the illustrations on this slide omit the full enclosure units for clarity's sake to show what happens and how the buildings will be deconstructed. Once gutting is complete inside the building, all of the interim status equipment has been removed. Exide will decontaminate the building itself and then deconstruct the building in a safe and sequential fashion. As shown above, deconstruction will begin at one end of the building and work to the other end to ensure structural integrity. Each truss, panel, or other building member will be decontaminated using a HEPA vac wipe down or pressure wash, and then it will be detached, unbolted or cut, while it is held by a demolition excavator with a thumb detachment. Then the truss, steel beam, or panel will be slowly lowered to the ground in a controlled fashion. The pictures here don't show it, but in general, 2 thumbed-along reach excavators will work in tandem to cut and lower each piece of the building. Once the building has been taken down, confirmation sampling will be conducted beneath the full enclosure units. This slide shows a typical demolition excavator on the left and shows 2 demolition excavators working in tandem on the right, similar to what I described a moment ago. After decontamination and building deconstruction of Segment 2 is completed, Exide will remove the 7 remaining kettles that were too large to move with an excavator or the existing building crane. Instead, a gantry crane will be constructed inside the full enclosure unit. This slide shows a gantry crane that will be used to lift the kettles out of their below-grade kettle gallery, transport them one at a time to a welded cradle, and then the cradles will be used so that the kettles can be dismantled and safely transported off-site. This slide shows the support cradle that will be used to dismantle the kettles using a combination of demolition excavators and construction saws. And on the right is a typical construction saw that will be used to cut the kettle shell away from the solidified lead inside. Once this is completed, kettles will be shipped off-site and confirmation sampling will continue. If you have any additional questions or concerns, please feel free to contact me at the email address or phone number above. Thank you.